Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We are all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
Hi, and welcome to Popcorn Psychology. So today we are going to be doing the runner-up for our Valentine's Day poll. We're going to be talking about love and basketball, which the first time I think we've all seen it, which is shameful on all of us because I know that it's a beloved romantic movie by Gina Prince Hayward. I think that's her full name, the director.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a nod from Hannah. Yes. So Love and Basketball is about, it came out in 2000. It's about two kids. It kind of follows them from when they're like, I think 11 all the way up until they're adults. And it is about, Monica and Quincy. They're two kids who live next to each other who both love basketball. And it shows them over the course of their growing up as they progress in their careers with basketball and also in their relationship with each other. So today we're going to be talking about, in terms of themes, we're going to be talking about the impact of parents on our identity. And we're also going to be talking about vulnerability versus fear in terms of relationships and intimacy and those kind of things. And as always, we'll be talking about treatment and final thoughts. So we'll jump right into it. So like I said, in Love and Basketball, we see our two main characters are Quincy and Monica, and they both have very strong parental figures. Both of our main characters, they come from dual parent households. They seem pretty well-to-do. They're really nice households that they live in. Quincy's dad is a ex-basketball player, right? An ex-pro player from the Clippers.
Current.
Oh, he's a current player.
Oh, he is current when the show first starts, right?
Movie opens, yeah.
He's current through much of the film. He's still playing even when he's in high school.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, and then it's in college when he's kind of trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
Where he's trying to become a scout. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I don't know if I picked up on that.
That's what he's doing. He's working on scouting part-time so he can get into a front office job.
Mm-hmm.
And or at least that's what he's saying when he's cheating. I don't know if that was just cover, but that seems to be what he's trying to do.
That's also true.
No.
Mm.
Or both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think what's really interesting about this movie is that it's very clear right away how much influence both main characters' parents have on who they are, either in terms of who they're trying to be or who they're trying not to be. And so I think with Quincy, as we were saying, because his dad is already like a professional, successful ball player, I think that has a lot of sway over Quincy and who he kind of wants to be, especially as like a younger kid.
Oh, definitely. I think it's a foundational part of his identity that he's going to follow in his dad's footsteps, which is interesting that he wants that so bad, but his dad wants nothing more than for him to go to Princeton and become a doctor. He does not want him to follow in his footsteps to become an NBA player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'll take back what I just said, actually, because you're right, because I forgot about that part. Like, actually, both Quincy and Monica, both of their parents want them to be something different than who they want to be.
Yeah.
So there is that common theme there.
I don't remember. Monica's dad is very supportive. He does all the filming for her, but her mother has no interest in basketball. I think that there's a pretty explosive scene where Monica finally confronts her mom, and her mom confronts her back, where they kind of hash out some stuff, but where she's confronting mom on like, I must have played in 4,000 games, and I think you went to 6.
2.
She went to 2.
It was 2?
She went to 2.
2.
And it's, I guess the thing that to point out in general, I'm fucking whatever, is that it's both parents. It's the same gender parent.
Oh, true.
That they both are pushing up the most against. And again, not that that necessarily is like a huge part of the movie, but just that thinking about it in terms of, again, like as a young person, having a role model for what you're supposed to be like. And so having this, I mean, Quincy had a pretty, well, initially, right, had a pretty good role model in terms of what he wanted to do, because that's what his dad had done. But Monica didn't really have a chance with her mom because her mom just wasn't connected. And also, unfortunately, didn't attempt to find anything that she could connect to with her daughter about her being in basketball, like very much took out her resentment for her own life. Getting pregnant with her oldest sister, and then having a second child and having to give up her dreams and taking that essentially out on her second daughter.
Yes.
Right. And like trying to force the relationship into being one that she could understand and that was within her value system without allowing Monica to have her own identity and connect to her with that. Like, obviously, she was present as a mom, but she wasn't present with Monica in the way that Monica needed her to be, in the way that Monica understood, which was through her love for playing basketball. Whereas her mom was very much more into more traditionally feminine things.
And I think what's so interesting about that is kind of what you just said, Hannah, is that her mom seems like in one of the arguments they had, like she's not happy in this kind of like the role that very gendered role that she's in of like housewife and mother. Yet she's like trying to shove it down Monica's throat, which is so interesting because I think for Quincy's dad, he's also trying to steer Quincy in a different direction, but it's more from like I did this and it did work out for me, and I have a lot of anxieties about long term, and so I want you to be in maybe a more stable career, and that's why I'm trying to steer you in that direction. So that seems to be more like I've learned from my experience and I want to guide you in a better direction, or maybe a less anxiety provoking direction. Whereas with Monica's mom, it's very much, I don't know if it's like the whole like pyramid scheme of it all, which is, I know there's a term for it in social psychology that I can't think of, which is when you're so bought into an idea that you have to believe it wholeheartedly. Because if you confront the idea that this belief is not true or not helpful, then it calls into question like your whole existence. So you kind of have to double down on what you're doing in order to like not have like a mental breakdown kind of, or just like an existential freak out. It's kind of how like pyramid schemes work for so long, or being involved in a system that is not like helpful, or even like an abusive relationship for so long, is because you like have to, it's hard to confront the idea that I've given so much time and energy and maybe money into something that does not work or is unhealthy or makes me very unhappy. And I think for some people they can't confront that.
Something
and so
like
then
the
they have to like
fallacy
keep
of
telling
amount
themselves.
spent.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's what's going on with Monica's mom, or if it's just like I don't know, some people, I don't want to say this necessarily, but I think some people, it's kind of, I don't know if the resentment piece of it is, I had to do this, so you have to do it. And it's not fair that you get to have maybe a better life than me or a more fulfilling life than me. Yeah.
It's
I don't know
the
what your
fallacy of
thoughts
sunk
are
costs
on it.
is part of what you're talking about there.
Oh, okay. That's the term for it.
That's part of it. I think you talked about two different theories there, but fallacy of sunk costs is definitely the one where people keep investing and like get past the cognitive dissonance where they cannot look at the situation clearly and adequately because it is so disruptive to their sense of self that they just shut it out entirely and don't interpret the facts. And then where the fallacy of sunk costs comes in is where people, I've already put so much in, I can't give up now. Maybe I'll eventually get this payout. I've already put so much in, I can't quit now. And I think that's an interesting thing to bring up because I think that is something that Q very much struggles with. When he's done, he doesn't want to play anymore.
Mhm.
Maybe we can talk more about that later, but that's what you're talking about there. It's fallacy of sunk costs, and then it's some degree of something that plays off cognitive dissonance.
Okay. Yeah, I'm horrible at I think I haven't really thought about this concept since I literally was in social psychology 101 in like undergrad, which is why it's not coming to me like the actual term for it. But it is that idea of, yeah, what you're saying is I've put too much into something. I can't confront the idea of acknowledging that it all might be a farce in some respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. Which would has to be like with an investment or anything else. It's like you would not continue to stand on a sinking boat that is going, well, I've already put so much effort into this boat, but it's literally sinking in the middle of the ocean, so I may as well stay on it. As I know it's sinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you have to be confronted with something that concrete before you can get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I wonder if for Quincy's dad, because I got this sense, and I don't know if you guys got this sense, but I got the sense too that his dad thought, I think he very much felt like Quincy was smarter than him and wanted him to use how intelligent he is. I mean, I'm not saying that the dad, I don't know why I felt that way, but it just felt like that was when he was saying that about going to Princeton. It just felt like it, to me, it felt like the dad was saying, because I could never have done that. That's kind of what I felt like, but I don't know if that was just me.
No, I agree. That's exactly kind of the sentiment that he repeats over and over, is that even when he's talking about going into the draft, the dad, repeats that sentiment over and over, that like, I want nothing more than for you to do the things that I couldn't. And even in that last conversation that they have in the hospital, when Q asks him, why couldn't you be the things you pushed me to be?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't you be the man you pushed me to be? I just couldn't.
Mm-hmm. And it does make me wonder too, what Quincy's parents' upbringings were like, because it also is a very, like, if they raise themselves up out of a lower status, which sometimes people do if they get into something like athleticism or like fame in some regard, and then wanting your kid to kind of do the prestigious stuff. It's kind of like that continuing to work up the social ladder, like each generation be better than the one before. It does make me wonder that as well, in terms of like Quincy's dad and like wanting that for him, like to go to like these fancy schools and get like a fancy degree from a fancy school and not be a ball player.
Unless I'm inventing it, he does say that was his story, that he didn't have anything other than ball.
Yeah. Okay. I probably missed that.
But that's what he was. He was just a guy in the locker room who was good at ball. He didn't have anything else, and he could see that Q did, and he wanted Q to use that.
And I'm sure his dad, like we've talked about sort of the anxiety of like post-career, but also his dad's been in the field. And so he's seen probably a lot of ball players have happened to them. What happened to Quince, ironically, is, you get one injury and you're screwed.
Yeah.
And so it's not a sustainable career. It's a people only play for a few years, and only certain people really make huge, huge, huge money. And it sounds like Quincy's dad was pretty successful with sports, but he might have been like more of an outlier.
Well, I mean, anybody that's that successful in sports is an outlier, and it becomes a really powerful thing with kids who get so wrapped in it and I've had a couple of kids with this, including one who had a parent who was a pro athlete. The thing that you see is that the kid becomes so stuck on this idea that I'm going to be this professional athlete, and completely ignore the statistics and don't understand the thing that the parent knows, because it is that. It's that thing that they see is that, I'm not a basketball fan really, but I am a big football fan. And the average NFL career is 1.5 years.
Yeah, it's I knew it was a really short statistic.
Yeah. Football is probably, I feel like football probably has the shortest. average, I would think, but I could be wrong about that because I feel like because of the possibility of getting hurt
Well, right.
is
But
so much higher.
it is, but on basketball, in basketball, it's like 15 players per team.
I have no idea. You could have told me 2 people play basketball. You could have told me 20 people play basketball at the time, and I would be like, yeah, okay.
Well,
But-
5 people play at a time, but I think teams have 15 or so on them. But if you think about the number of colleges that all exist, D1 colleges versus there are 30 pro teams.
Yeah.
There are
And
30
even when
pro teams
Quincy-
with 5 starters.
And yeah, I could say even when Quincy's on the Lakers, he's a sub. So I think
Correct.
this movie does a good job of being really, I imagine, of being more realistic about success within basketball or with athletic sport, like athletic sports. That's a redundant term. With sports in general.
Yes,
Well, I'm not into athletic sports. If you guys couldn't tell, listen.
Brittany is a sports ball person.
Sure.
That means you
Put
don't
that
care
ball
about
through
sports
the
at all.
touchdown hole.
This is a different discussion.
Cool,
What's funny
guys.
is
Cool.
I was raised with all brothers who all played sports, and I couldn't tell you a single thing about them.
Yeah.
But I
Yep.
think continuing on like the Quincy discussion though, because he does have his relationship with his father, because I'm just going to focus in on his father, because it's almost like, yeah, both kids, like you were saying, Hannah, both main characters have a very fleshed out relationship with one parent, and it's the parent that shares their gender. And then there are other parents kind of there in the movie intermittently, but it's not as
Just not highlighted in the
it's not
same
highly,
way.
yeah, you're right. And so I think Quincy has a mostly very positive relationship with his dad. I think he feels very connected to his dad, very looks up to his dad, like idolizes his dad. And then he finds out in college that his dad is, his mom tells him, which I did not like, showed him pictures of his dad cheating, like a private detective showing dad cheating.
He finds
And-
out about that through the media. That somebody that it gets confirmed by mom, but
Well,
he
it's the
found out
paternity
through-
case.
right. He finds out
dad is
through the
paternity
media
case.
that there's a paternity case, which means therefore
Yeah.
that obviously that tripped and fell argument doesn't hold weight. So
Yeah.
Never does.
Yeah.
people try it though. I don't know. It's a toilet seat. Tripped and fell. We're in a sauna.
Yeah. But we see like kind of the impact that happens when you have a very idolized idea of who your parent is. And I do think this is a very common thing where you reach a point in your life as a child, or as usually a bit more grown around Quincy's age, maybe younger, depending on how your childhood was growing up, where you kind of realize that your parents are people and that your parents can be huge fuck ups. You know, that they're fallible people. And I think up until that point, I really think Quincy thought his dad like hung the moon and like could do no wrong.
He did. It shattered his identity when
Yes.
he found out that his dad was not who he thought he was, that his dad was, that looking up to his dad and listening to his dad mostly and following in his footsteps and was the way to go, was absolutely the right way to live life, was to be like dad and to have what dad had. And to find out that his dad was not who he thought he was shattered him.
And I feel
And I
like
think what was hard too. Oh, go ahead, Hannah.
You go ahead, Brittany.
Because I was gonna say, I think what also was really hard about this situation, it's not just that he found out that his dad was like, he made mistakes or he like did some things wrong or was just kind of like a goober or whatever. He found out that his dad did like intentional, really horrific stuff and was, like intentionally like a cheater and a liar. And like, that's such a very different energy than just finding out your parent like makes mistakes. It's always so very different to find out that your parent does things that contradicts with your morals and what you thought was probably aligned morals. Because I think too, which was kind of like, watching it earlier, was like, there's an earlier scene in the movie where he hears his parents have pretty aggressive sex, like in my opinion. And he like goes over to Doesn't
I
he
don't
go over
think,
to Monica's
girl,
house?
it's not aggressive sex. You
They're
just
fighting.
Well, it's loud.
when you the fights are loud. It's not loud.
Yeah.
It's just loud in terms of when you live in a house that isn't insulated great, you hear your parents have sex. Like that's kind of like not a totally unrealistic
Well, I guess I was
thing.
never had to hear my parents have sex, thank Christ. So that was different for me watching this movie. Maybe I'm having a singular experience, but but I guess where I'm going with that is I think he also thought of his parents as being very into each other. You know, they fought, but they also were very passionate about each other. So I think it probably also threw off his identity in terms of what he thought his parents' relationship were too, which can have a big impact on how you view romance and relationships for yourself.
Well, and I was thinking just about how different it would have been if his dad had been more, because his if his dad either had more awareness about his son idolizing him versus like wanting to, you know what I mean? Like how intensely he was kind of doing those things and really just wanted to be like his dad. I mean, he always had a Clippers jersey, like he wore a Clippers jersey all the time, and when he was a little boy, like I think that if the dad had been, and he not even necessarily like changed everything he did or anything, but just kind of been more like everybody makes mistakes sometimes, like just in general, just kind of putting that out there a little bit, I think this might not have been such a big flip. I have a friend who had who knew someone who had a parent who just like was like one of those people who was like the model of a good partner and in the community. No, actually, that's not what I meant. That's actually not what I was thinking about at all.
Did you just
Sorry, I was
derail your
mouthing
own?
something to Hannah.
No, me and Brittany are making eyes over here. Just don't worry about it. So, but anyway, and that when that happened, when that came out about this person, everybody in the family, the whole family was like just completely and utterly rocked. And this devastating identity piece happened with the family members, just kind of in general. So again, that piece of putting up this huge moral, wall for everybody is, I think that, that's part of what made this so hard. I mean, I think kids, I think that kids, I just lost my train of thought. It doesn't fucking matter. Go ahead.
So
I feel like if this show had a bingo card, Hannah saying I lost my train of thought would be somewhere on that bingo card.
I'm sure it fucking would be. For real.
While we're talking about bingo cards, I feel like in order to help anyone else who might be listening get a bingo, just so that we get it right out of the way here, is
You're just going to talk about Batman?
I sure am.
Son of a bitch.
Like,
Batman is the middle square, is the free space
Yeah, it's
of
the free
our show.
space. Go ahead, Ben.
She is the voice of Catwoman in the Harley Quinn show, which is a absolutely fantastic, hilarious show. It's like Deadpool.
Are you talking about Monica? You have to give more context to your Batman reference.
Monica.
Like swing out from the side.
I said Sanaa.
In the
That's
face
her name,
with
though.
every
The actress's
episode.
name. It's
Okay. I didn't hear you say that part. I heard you just start launching into that discussion, and I'm like, do people even know who you're talking about?
The actress that plays Monica also does the voice for Catwoman in the Harley Quinn show, set in the Batman universe. There you go. Which is on HBO Max. Highly recommend. Anyway, all these things that we're talking about, maybe you two are going to disagree with me here, but I think that the most accurate mental health condition we see represented by Q here is adjustment disorder.
Post his dad getting found out.
Correct. Like, when we see, I mean, we see some of it out of Monica too as a kid, but we just don't see her long enough for adjusting to the move and having some behaviors. But adjustment disorder is a condition that can set in following the onset of a major change in your life that disrupts the way you typically operate, or just it causes a move or a job change or a school change or any of these things. And the having your identity and your concept of your father shattered would certainly meet the criteria for that. And when we talk about the things that we look for in adjustment disorder, we're looking for things that impact the way that people feel and think about themselves and the world, and may also affect your actions or behaviors. And some of the criteria for that mimic depression, anxiety, or sometimes they can be both, or they can have behavior disturbance. And some of these things we would see are feeling sad, hopeless, crying, feeling anxious, nervous, stressed out. We might see trouble sleeping, lack of appetite, difficulty concentrating, being overwhelmed, having a difficult time completing your ADLs, which activities of daily living, and withdrawing from social supports, avoiding such important things as going to work or paying bills, and can even rise to the level of suicidal thoughts. But this adjustment we see Q go through in particular is a really great example of what that can look like. The onset can be quick, but it doesn't necessarily meet the criteria, especially not in length of time, that would be needed in order to give somebody major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. And why that's an important distinction is because you can't give major depressive disorder without symptoms being present for at least 2 weeks, and generalized anxiety, you need at least a month. And the other thing that becomes important with these is if there's an identifiable cause for their behavior shift, that adjustment disorder is the more correct diagnosis than just assuming, oh, Q's depressed. Q's depressed because his life is messed up because he found out his identity got shattered and the way he thought of the world. So he's depressed. And you have to dial that back and look like he's not like, yes, he's exhibiting depressive symptoms, but what he's dealing with is an adjustment.
And also adjustment disorder can be tied to behaviors. So if you are demonstrating behaviors that are more like conduct disorder adjacent, which I think also works with Quincy's presentation after this situation, because he's also doing kind of riskier stuff, like he's being mean, in a lot of ways, and kind of callous, and drinking more and being more sexually promiscuous and that kind of thing. And so I think he's definitely presenting, because kind of the way I think of it when I possibly diagnose people with it is, are they acting out of character right after an event happens in their life that they are having trouble adjusting to? And it's different than PTSD. PTSD has its own set of criteria that's different than adjustment disorder. And adjustment disorder is more of a bigger catch-all. With PTSD, it's more like something like that puts you kind of in danger, or you witness something that's endangering. And adjustment disorder is way more bigger net. Like it could be like we're talking about here, like your parents get divorced, or even if you're getting bullied at school and something like that. So yeah, it's like you're adjusting to a circumstance. And I think what's different now is it used to be in the diagnostic manual that someone would only be diagnosed with adjustment disorder for like a short period of time. And now it's lengthened. If you can keep the diagnosis of adjustment disorder, if the thing you're adjusting to is chronic, like if it keeps occurring, like in an abusive relationship, or just a situation like you're moving around a lot or something like that, where you're continuing to adjust to something and you're continuing to have a hard time adjusting to the thing that's continuing to affect you. Yeah, COVID would be an example of that, where an ongoing situation.
Right. The impact of the stressor or the adjustment is continuing for an extended period of time. So long as the behaviors can be direct and the mood changes can be directly tied to the impact of the change, adjustment disorder continues to be an appropriate choice to use. And the downside of this is that insurance companies like to stop paying for adjustment disorder diagnoses and they'll start challenging after 4 to 6 sessions with it.
Those
Which sucks
insurance
because-
companies is the
yeah.
bane of our existence. They're horrible. I hate them.
Well, because it also falls into the idea that something has to be like diagnostically wrong with you in order for you to go to therapy, and not just like I'm having a hard time with something and why can't I see a professional to help me through that?
Yeah.
Which is why they pick at that. Because that's basically what adjustment disorder is basically you just need help getting through a situation that's really hard on you, and you're not necessarily quote unquote mentally ill.
Right. And to, like budding therapists out there, this is an important conversation I would have with anybody that I supervise, is sitting down with them and going like, look, you have to either explicitly, expressly defend why this is adjustment in your documentation in every note. It can't be, oh, it's in my assessment. No, you did your assessment 6 weeks ago. It has to be in every note that the impact of X, Y, or Z stressors are ongoing, continuing to be the primary cause of dysfunction in the client's life. And at that point, it is a defensible position and you can use it. Not every insurance company is a bastard about it, but there are some who I will not name who are really big bastards about pretty much everything and don't like to pay for nothing. And that creates a situation where therapists sometimes have to assign a diagnosis that would be considered like more in a higher risk category, like using generalized anxiety disorder instead of assigning adjustment disorder. Or with somebody like Q, we see obvious signs of depression in him. You see obvious signs of depression. And like Brittany was saying, with adjustment disorder, there's 3 categories. There's, or maybe four. There's adjustment disorder with anxiety, adjustment disorder with depression, adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depression, adjustment disorder with, no, there's 5.
It's behavior and conduct.
Right, with behavior and conduct and mood and behavior issues or whatever. So with him, like, we would not want to assign a diagnosis of depression to this individual when there is an identifiable cause that is clear. But as his provider, you might have to expect some challenge from the insurance provider on your use of diagnosis, and they might want, well, it seems like depression might be a more adequate descriptor because this is ongoing. And you're like, I don't know, his dad is having a paternity case drag out in the media. His parents' marriage is dissolving. His concept of himself and who his dad, who was his hero, was, is continuing to be eroded publicly. No, I don't think depressive is the correct diagnosis. And especially in keeping a social justice mindset, it is important to consider the impact of a diagnosis on a client based on their demographics. And when you're talking about a young African-American male, the last thing you want to do is assign them a higher diagnosis than really meets the criteria they're presenting, because it's more particular to conduct disorder. But African-American males that get assigned with conduct disorder can have a much harder time with the way that their lives are handled with insurance or with school or with what kinds of classes or experience they have growing up. And it's important to be mindful of using the least restrictive diagnostic category you can on all clients, but especially being mindful that when you have clients who already face other challenges for none other reason than the color of their skin, that you are extra mindful of what diagnostic labels you are slapping on people, and that you are properly defending your clinical reasoning.
100%, especially since he's younger and you don't know where he's going to go, like life path wise. So, having a diagnosis, slapped on him that's more behavioral, instead of being compassionate, could have implications. I think it's a good thing to point out. I think you see it more in like kids that are younger, their symptoms or how they're presenting will be written off as like oppositional defiant or, conduct disorder, when it's just, are they sad and are they anxious and it's coming out in behavior. So it's more the demonization of, people of color that, that they're more behavioral. than a white kid who you might say like, oh, but they're sad. It's a whole thing. Yeah. And I think that's a good point to bring up. I'm glad you brought that up, Ben. And it's also a good point, which I was thinking of as you were saying it, of his dad's famous. So this situation will drag out. Like he might go to the grocery store and see it on the fucking National Enquirer. And so that's what I mean is it's going to be continued stressor on him, which is why adjustment disorder would continue to apply, because it's not letting up. It's a situation that keeps evolving, and therefore he has to keep adjusting to every sort of evolution of the situation. And so it might be where it might get better, and then it gets worse, and then it gets better again, and then it gets way worse. And also too, his mom understandably is having a huge reaction to this, and will probably hopefully would get her own therapy and her own adjustment disorder diagnosis as she's adjusting to being cheated on and then being humiliated publicly. And that's going to be a continuing thing as well. And then I don't know if it seems like he's still living somewhat with his parents all the way into the end of the movie when he's like, because when he's engaged to Tyra Banks, they finally clear out his bedroom.
Yeah.
And so also he's with his mom a lot. And so her pain is his pain, the way it is when you live with someone and they're so in deep pain, you feel it.
Well, and just how we've talked about before about being a single parent and having a child and having gone through a traumatic experience, and how it's, you can't keep that from the person you live with in your house. Like it's not something that's really possible, and that it would be really hard. And again, and also just the consistency with which this could be brought up, or friends saying shit to him, or, I mean, there's just so many that the fact that his dad is famous just adds such an intense level to all of this as well.
And he's famous. Don't forget.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah, he is.
He's famous.
Yeah, I mean,
it's true. That kid walks up and asks for his autograph in the bar, not his dad's, his autograph when they're at the bar together.
I mean, I know Hannah's a little more sports ball than Brittany, but he's playing at USC.
Yeah, which is huge.
That's
huge. I don't even know what that means. It's South Carolina, Southern California.
Southern California.
Okie dokie. That makes more sense now that I'm thinking about the fact that they still kind of see their parents a lot.
Yeah, I mean, even South Carolina would be a big deal.
Although they actually,
rather than calling themselves Trojans, they'd have to be Gamecocks, which is a whole nother discussion.
Yeah,
but anyway, he's famous, and thinking about using the least restrictive diagnosis possible, going like, here's a completely explainable thing that happens. If he's entering the draft and has to turn over his medical records in order for teams to consider drafting him,
or just like insurance,
or if he wants to be a police officer or a firefighter or join the military or the FBI.
But here's the thing about that. I have a question about this for you guys, because I feel like, and because I've actually had this come up with a couple of parents that I've been working with recently. The idea that, because I totally agree, I give the least diagnosis all the time because diagnosis is for insurance. But just wondering if, I don't know.
Train of thought.
It doesn't matter. Just keep talking. I'll figure it out.
Did your brain train just leave again?
Double bingo. Well,
Hannah,
I don't know if this is where you're going. Like, I don't know if this is where you're taking it, Hannah, but I do know that continues the stigma related to mental health. And if you have depression or something like that, you would give someone like him depression if he had depression.
Yeah.
And it sucks that would have an impact on possibly his hiring or his attractiveness in certain fields.
Well, and this is what I was going to say, is that where is this idea that this is going to follow him everywhere? Because I feel like that is more likely to happen when a kid is in school, and it's like maybe that document where it's documented with the school. But in terms of an insurance diagnosis, like maybe for somebody who would be at his level, it would possibly be a thing. But medical records, like they would have to get medical records from, do you know what I mean? Like, because I have parents who say this, like, well, what about when? And I'm like, they're not going to have access to your insurance information. They're not going to know what the diagnosis is. So I feel like telling a school that's a better chance of it following somehow. But that other than that, in terms of going to different mental health providers and the different people we see and the different, even me working at a different practice and like them getting notes. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand this idea of how it can follow you everywhere. Like, is there some giant...
I can answer that.
Yeah, tell me, because I don't fucking get it.
I can answer that. So the way that it can follow you is that if you apply for life insurance, or if you go to a type of job where you have to surrender your medical records or they don't need to consider you, like somewhere like the FBI or the military or police or fire, or if someone's going to maybe pay you $25 million a year, they're probably going to want to do a full health workup on you. And for many of those things, there are clauses in them where that they can, if you lie on the application, they can terminate you or terminate your coverage if they find out later that there was previous things that weren't disclosed.
Yeah, but where is the proof that they're going to find out before you tell them? That's what I'm saying.
See, that's the thing though. Like, if there's a bill with it somewhere and you signed a release and they go into that or goes into discovery in a court case, then there's hoops, but it could come out. It can happen.
But it's not like everybody has this medical record that's following them around behind the back of their head. And that when they got told that they had adjustment disorder when they were fucking 13, that's going to come up at an interview. Like, that's not like, unless they're in these very specific things, that's not something that like really, that's just not something that can happen. And also fucking life insurance companies. Not
for the general public, but like
for someone in his position, absolutely.
For someone in his position, most parents are going to come from the mindset that they want their kid to have those types of things. Like those kinds of things, like if you're applying for a security clearance, they 100% ask you about any mental health diagnosis you've ever had. And even though it's complete bullshit, they will factor that in.
Yeah, but then, but at the same time, so I have major depressive disorder, right? And generalized anxiety. And so if I just say that I have an adjustment disorder, they can't there's not like somebody who's going to come up and say, oh, no, you didn't. You were diagnosed with major depressive disorder. Like that's
my assumption would be because
that's the part that I don't understand.
Are you assuming that the government and anybody who has the power to subpoena such records could not get them?
No, I am saying that not every single place that you have an interview from or go to something with is going to do the work or subpoena things. That's what I'm saying.
They're not, but the spirit of your argument is that people should dismiss it almost. And like, that's because it's probably not going to happen and it should be ignored. And it can't be, because if someone wants to, if someone wants to be a Navy SEAL and then they have to put on an application whether they did this or not, and then someone finds out later that they had a history of it, it comes up some way, somehow, which there's always a way. If it exists in documentation, it can come up at some point. Like what level of that and what effort it takes varies, and obviously can be quite restrictive because HIPAA laws are pretty intense. So the likelihood that it becomes a thing is low, which I think is what you're saying, but that it can be dismissed because the likelihood is low is not true.
Well, I still think it could be dismissed, but I know what you mean. I just mean that it would take a lot, but that sure, there is a chance if you're going to be a fucking SEAL, fine. But like, it just seems like this, that people jump to that really quick, that parents with, or people of color just seem to jump to it really fast as if it's something that happens all the time. That's the vibe that I get. So that's why I'm trying to understand, where the fuck did this come from? So that makes sense that somehow at some point in your life, maybe somebody's going to find this out. Sure. That makes sense to me. But the idea that it's something that's going to happen imminently or like all the time just doesn't feel accurate. That's the part that I meant.
Right. And it's not accurate that it'll be there all the time. But what is accurate is that there will be things that ask you that all the time. Whether you choose to answer that truthfully, then you put yourself at risk for, the likelihood that they're going to pursue it is low.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. I gotcha.
I have a Chinese visa. And and straight up, they ask you blunt, do you have any mental disorders on your application to get a Chinese visa? They ask you on any firearm purchase. They ask you on a firearms card application. They ask you if you're going to be, any sort of armed profession. They're going to ask. And that's a lot of the things that some people's families have done. And they've had family members who have lost jobs or lost applications because they checked yes on those boxes. So that's why it's there.
Mm-hmm.
I had a client apply 3 times to be the police who, despite having a particular diagnosis that could be considered severe, did not have a severe presentation of it and was compliant, and there was not a lot of reason to believe this person shouldn't be considered for that reason only, and got disqualified for that reason. So
but also the police are like, ugh, whatever. I mean, like, they have so many. They just, I think it just doesn't.
It's a frustrating situation.
I get your point, Ben, and that totally makes sense. And sure, absolutely, that totally makes sense. And I guess maybe, as we're talking about this, what I'm more frustrated about probably is just that question is even asked. That it's asked on so many things in the way that it's asked, when we don't support mental health in a way that question should be allowed to be asked that consistently. It's not as if
I agree with.
Yeah. And I know that you would. Like, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just, that piece just doesn't, it's just frustrating. So anyway, go ahead, Brittany.
And I would say, in my experience and the way that I was speaking about it, is that I think I was thinking of it more if you have to make sure that you are giving the proper diagnosis in a way that's least stigmatizing, or at least most compassionate, in the sense of when I've worked with younger kids and families that are not white. I think there is a lot of quick to judgment about kids being more behavioral. And then I think that can follow kids around. And I know Quincy's older, which I think is what you're leaning on as well. Yeah. But if this would happen when he was 12 and then he started acting out pretty behaviorally, I think that's where I always am mindful about how I'm approaching it, because that will follow a kid. Like, they'll become a bad, quote unquote, like bad kid, troubled kid, and they won't get the resources they need because they're being written off as a behavioral issue instead of someone who is in pain or distressed or anxious or depressed or whatever. And also I think, like, I'm a white person, but I would also imagine, just on what I know historically, is that there's so much distrust in the system and in the mental health system. The mental health system's still a baby in terms of every other system we have, like diagnostically.
Absolutely.
And so I think there's a lot of distrust in where information will go, and also that, especially people who are not white who are within the system, that they will be appropriately taken care of, and that won't be another thing used against them as they go through life. So I think there's just a lot of worry about, like, one more thing that will be used against my child. And also people just don't know. I think people do, even like families I work with who are white, I think there is just this like unknowingness of what happens with mental health diagnosis. It's like I do know what you mean, though. It's like parents think it's going to be floating above their heads the rest of their life. And that is, it's sad.
True.
It's sad and frustrating. And it's it continues the stigma of, like, having a mental health diagnosis is bad. Because even if you were depressed and everyone knew you were depressed, I'm depressed, you're depressed, Hannah. Like, what does it matter? Like, I'm still, like, a good person and a good employee and a good worker, and Quincy would still be a good person and a good worker and all that kind of stuff, even if they had depression. Like any other diagnosis, physical or mental health, it's only impacts you if it's flaring up and or you can't manage it in some regard, or you refuse to manage it in some regard, and also the severity. I mean, there's a whole part to that. But I know this is an important conversation. I'm glad we had it, but we swerved off a little bit, because we talked about Quincy a lot. I think if we could swerve to Monica, we've touched upon it already. But I think one thing we noticed with her growing up is such a an outright rejection by her mom of who she is. And it does say a lot about Monica's tenacity and resilience, and surety of herself, that she is so determined to be who she is, even with a mom who is constantly telling her that she's wrong or that she won't be happy or loved or anything. And a mom who's constantly trying to make her into someone else. Like she says, like, you're hiding your dresses. Like Monica as a kid was hiding her dresses in, I think, the garage or a closet or an attic or something. It was underneath something else. And her mom blaming her for getting beat up in the beginning of the movie because she was acting like a boy or looking like a boy. And I think one thing that Monica does hit upon, which they don't really go into at all, is like, you think I'm a lesbian. And her mom goes, no, like kind of like brushes it off. But it does make me wonder if that is a bigger part of the conversation, I wonder if her mom has anxiety about her being gay and coming off as gay, or at least not coming off as
feminine.
And it does make sense if too, like, why, I'll just talk about women, why some women cling so fiercely to gender roles is because, like, her mom, I'm sure, is totally, at least financially, dependent upon her father. And so I think there can be a genuine fear, which is an old school fear, but a genuine fear that if you don't comply with femininity, you will not succeed. Like, no one will marry you, and then you will be in poverty, basically. And you'll be unfulfilled. So I think it can come from a very loving place, and it's such a narrow-minded place.
Yeah, because I feel like the other part of this that is so hard for Monica and is so apparent is also that her mother doesn't give her as much affection or show interest in her until she gets dressed up, because her sister, because the sister makes an effort to help her take care, like to help, she got her a dress and like got her a date and like made sure that she could have fun and feel comfortable. And I feel like the fact that her mother gives her so much praise in that moment is also another piece of, oh, so this is the only version of me that you really accept. And that
I think go ahead.
Sorry. And I feel like part of her, not to take away from her resiliency, because I totally agree with you, but also that I would imagine that her relationship with her sister accepting her and loving her and not seeming to have any of the same conflict that her mother seems to have with her doesn't seem to exist between the two of them. And so I feel like having that person in her life probably helped bolster and kind of like support the resiliency that she already has.
Yeah, because her sister does her hair for the dance, but she also braids her hair to play basketball in. She doesn't just withhold her affection for the quote unquote like right situations. Like, she is very accepting of her. And also, like, her sister has her own way of dealing with their mom, and kind of, I'm sure she has her own very feelings about her mom, because I think the only time you really see it is when she has her baby and her mom's like nagging her only slightly about that the baby's not basically dressed appropriately for the outside. And so the way she handles it is goes, oh, I guess we're not dressed appropriately for outside. I guess the baby's going inside. Goodbye, grandma. Like, it's a very very passive, polite, passive aggressive approach. So I'm sure she has her own way of being like, I can't deal with you right now. Goodbye. Like, and so I think they've both grown up with a mom who unfortunately can't really let them live, or just be kind. I mean, because she's not I guess I would describe her as cold as well. She's kind of a cold person who comes off like the stereotypical like housewife, like loving on the surface, but pretty cold underneath. And we don't know her mom's.
Yeah, we don't know anything
her
about
mom's
her
life
mom.
was like, so that could tell us a ton about why she is the way she is. But I do think the thing that made me, I could have like smacked her mom, is like towards the end of the movie when she comes home because she's sad because the Quincy situation, I think, or something along those lines. Yeah, she comes home after
after seeing Quincy in the hospital.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then her mom, it's the 1,000 games argument. And because her mom was still bringing up the dance And it wasn't even like prom. It was like the spring dance or something. And I was like, can you imagine that she's gone to Europe to play basketball. She's been like basically a celebrity
She's
internationally.
A champion. They won.
Yeah. And her mom is still talking about a dance she went to in high school. The one time she fulfilled her mom's wishes. Like that would make me feel, I'd go berserk. Like the fact that the mom is still glomming onto this one, in my opinion, insignificant,
absolutely,
like high school situation, and ignoring all of the like super fantastic ways that Monica has been successful in a field for women that is notoriously hard to be successful in.
And
she won't give her a scrap.
Bias that all female athletes are gay, and that they, and then the just pure facts that they're underpaid and they are undervalued compared to their male counterparts. Like, how many people can name more than 2 WNBA teams?
Well, I can barely name 2 male NBA teams. So.
Can you even name?
I can name the 2 that were in this movie because I just was told them.
Name ours here, even the one
the
in
Bulls.
Chicago.
Well, yeah, because that was like
the Bulls. Michael Jordan.
You'd have to be like headless in the 90s to not know who the Bulls were.
Yes, I meant the WNBA teams. Considering that she plays for one at the end, which would be the Sparks.
The Sparks? Yes.
Yeah.
Which I only know from watching this movie.
But ours here is the Sky.
But it's like, I mean, it is that, I think if Monica were to go to therapy, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of us, but it is that it is coming to the terms of the fact that you're never going to get validation from one of the people in your life. That I think everyone wants validation from their parents, no matter who their parents are, either validation from their literal parents or validation from who they think their parents could be, like kind of the abstract concept of a parent. And so I would imagine, and this could be part of like Monica comes off kind of like, which could just be her personality, like a little like guarded, and a little shyer. She seems like someone who might be a little hard to get to know, which could just be her personality. But I also wonder if it's because she's been kind of shit on her whole life by her mom. Like her mom's kind of told her time and time again, like the way that you are, you shouldn't necessarily be proud of, or it's not something that's going to be attractive to other people. So if you want to be this kind of person, then you need to just put your head down and don't expect more than what your work is putting out.
Well, and I feel like, even when we see the interaction that she has with the young men that she walks up to in the opening of the movie, and the way that she gets treated, her assuming that she's a boy until she takes her hat off, like even getting that reinforcement from the other side of like, it's a girl, like she doesn't know how to play probably, so kind of getting this narrative that's started by the mom that she's not acceptable the way that she is, and that narrative then being reinforced in natural ways in the environment around her, because she still is it's not popular to be a girl who likes basketball. Like that's, it's not, that's just how it is.
And even in high school, that Gabrielle Union's character sits down next to her and is like, you hang out with Quincy, like, can you give him this note? Like, it doesn't occur to the other girls that she could be dating him. Like, everyone knows that they're together all the time, and yet no one feels threatened by her, or at least Gabrielle Union's character doesn't feel like threatened by her existence, or even assumes that she's that she's nothing but like a friend to Quincy. And not just a friend, but like a little lackey that she can give that note to pass along. So she's also not viewed as a feminine sexual possibility. And that's also could be like chicken or the egg. Like, is that just because of how she is, or is it because she has been told for so long that she's not an attractive person or attractive girl, that she's kind of dressed herself and held herself in a way that also makes her seem less attractive to the environment? And that's part of, kind of leading back to our thesis, how our parents can impact like how we are, like how we present ourselves to the world. And that's a self-fulfilling prophecy of then, yeah, my mom's right. Because no one's hitting on me. No one's interested in me. The only time I get a date in high school is when my sister gets a guy that she knows to take me to the dance. And even then he finds me attractive because I look nothing like myself.
Because I look like her.
Yeah.
Like your sister's right. You do look just like her.
So again, even in that moment, her identity isn't singular. It's she's being compared to someone else. And also that Quincy doesn't seem to notice her sexually until she comes to that dance in that dress either.
No, he sure doesn't.
It would be
He's like,
it would be really hard for me. It would be really hard for me as Monica to not, because they have sex that night. And I think it would be really hard for me the next day to not be like, oh, well, he doesn't really like me. He just thought it's like I was like Cinderella for the night.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I would have been able to like generalize that out to like our full relationship, but it does. We don't really see because I think it goes straight to like the next year when they're in college together and they're in a relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in a relationship from that point forward.
Yeah. So we don't really see, but I guess what I mean is we don't see the fallout of that, like how it forms or like what the next day is like. It just kind of is.
Sure.
It jumps forward in time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we see that it formed that he finally recognizes her for who she is. And then he, sends Gabrielle Union home, which is a baffling decision according to her character.
Fantastic in this movie.
She looks fantastic always.
Yeah,
that's also true. Yeah, that's also true.
I mean, this is not complicated, but like her telling him that he is the dumbest guy alive. I thought was like, well,
true.
But then she went and married her own basketball player for real. So, yeah, she's doing all right. She didn't need Quincy.
So I think we could probably start switching now that we're kind of talking about their relationship with each other. We kind of shift into the next topic, which is obviously a big part of this movie because it's a romantic movie is the relationship with each other. And I think and then bring up the topic of like vulnerability versus like fear is the turning point of that is they're very vulnerable with each other. I think because they've known each other for so long, they're almost like a brother-sister relationship. But it's always been sort of romantic. I think what's funny was watching in the beginning is when they were like, we should kiss now. and it's like them trying on being little adults, which I always think is so funny when kids do things just because they think like they're trying to figure out how adults do things, but they don't really quite know how it works. Like when she says, okay, but for how long do we kiss for? I really liked that part.
I thought that was like one of the best depictions of how kids try to have relationships that I've ever seen. And I really was like, now see, they just nailed it right there.
That whole, all of that conversation, the way that they talk to each other, the way they respond to each other, all of that felt so accurate in terms of what it's really like versus what I feel like we get when we see those kinds of interactions with kids. Like that just felt really like I had that conversation with somebody, you know what I mean? Like it just felt like such a natural exchange. Anyway.
But I think they've gotten to grow up together, and so they have that foundation of being able to be very vulnerable with each other because they don't get to know each other through the veil of trying to be attracted to each other, like the way that when you meet someone and it's immediately romantic or trying to be romantic where you're trying to be like the best version of yourself for a little while, and then you kind of become more vulnerable over the space of time. They have the privilege of coming together as friends, and so there's more vulnerability that just comes like the fact that when his parents fight, he goes over to her house and he sleeps on the floor. Like they already kind of know the hard parts of each other's life and kind of the parts of yourself that you can sometimes hide because you don't want the other person to think that you're too screwed up or too damaged to like be in a relationship. And so I think it's interesting to see that shift when Quincy finds out that his dad is an adulterer and they're in that relationship, and we see kind of the vulnerability switch, like almost like turn off, like a switch within Quincy when his world gets shattered in terms of his dad being a cheat.
Oh, big time. His whole like attitude and demeanor changes, and especially it changes, and he gets like, vindictive when she chooses her playing career over his immediate needs that night when they're sitting out on the bleachers, and she's like, he's obviously struggling and needs her, and she can't be there for him because she has to go back to her room for curfew or she doesn't get to play.
So I don't want to get into a whole other side conversation that's not related to like the points we're trying to make, but I think I had some trouble accepting that. I get that when you're young, before the age, and when I say that, before the age 25, when your brain fully develops, because your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25.
Right.
I thought it was 26.
It's 25. I think your frontal lobe fully develops by 25. I could be wrong, but
27 for men.
Ooh, that makes sense.
That sounds about right. But you do think of things very like more black and white and that kind of thing. And so I guess I struggled to accept that, because he could have gone back with her to her room. That wasn't like the only opportunity they had to talk. He could have.
It wasn't.
I think I struggle with how much she is to blame for that situation, because there was some flexibility there, a compromise there that he was willing to make, and then he totally took that out of her and like made her a villain when they broke up. And I know that that's also because he's hurting, and in that moment he is deciding that he's no longer going to be vulnerable with her because she made one, I guess, mistake, if you want to put it like that.
Which is a developmentally appropriate thing to happen. I thought it was depicted well, because I could see very much like somebody who's a star to the level he is. He's a huge rising star. He's not used to people telling him no. He's not used to rules applying to him probably in the same way that they do to everyone else. And he's used to having things at his beck and call. And when she sets limits on him and he resists and she follows through with it, he feels abandoned. And no, I don't agree with him. I'm fully on board with you, Brittany. He was absolutely responsible. He could have like not been a man child and gone and said like, of course we can talk in your room so that you can play too. And you can have success too. Like obviously he could have done that, but
because that also continues the narrative of women have to be all things, and compromising in all ways.
Yes.
Correct. And also that I should, she, like her mother, would have to sacrifice her dreams in order to allow her man to pursue his, which is absolutely part of this discussion. And she did not. And he'd like, no, I want to stay out here. Like, okay, well, that's your choice. She has to go back. And that because she stuck to her guns, she got to live her dream.
And also that I feel like she also told him and was clear with him, like, I'm not getting the same treatment you are as a player. Like they'll let you do like, not, she didn't say this, but like she has to follow the rules. Her and that coach are not really on the same page in the beginning. And so it's like him also not being able, and again, totally understandable in the scenario. And I do think a part of me also just wonders if that like a part of losing his identity is also like, I just wonder if there's a really small part of him that is like, I don't want to hurt her the way that my dad hurt my mom. So I'm just gonna find a reason. I'm going to get it out of the way and just end this so it doesn't happen. And I'm not saying, and I don't know, but I remember feeling that way when I was watching it happen. Cause I was just thinking, dude, you could just go to her room with her. like what is the deal here?
Or this is a fight you can get past.
Absolutely.
Like this seems like it's your first big fight. Like you can't forgive her for this. And I do think kind of connected to what we've been talking about with the identity is what what's horrible is when you so strongly identify with someone and then they are a person you didn't think they were. Then you can still identify with them, even if after you felt maybe betrayed by them in a negative way, which is I'm so
Right.
like my dad in so many ways. Maybe I'm also a cheater, like my dad is a cheater. And so, and he like, cause he's such a switch where he is like hitting on that girl in front of her. Like I could have smacked him silly when he is hitting on that girl at the party, when he's hugging her, when he takes her out to like lunch right in front of Monica at some girl he's been dating very seriously for like at least a year, and acting like it's no big deal. I mean, it's very stereotypical, like pushing someone away, like I'll make you break up with me,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't think he's very conscious of what he's doing while he's doing it. I think it's very much like he is in dialectical behavioral therapy, you can think about how you're in your emotion mind or you're in your rational mind, which is your emotion mind is your thoughts, your feelings, your hopes, your dreams, your desires. And your rational mind is like logic, you know? And I think he's very in his emotion mind is how I would put it if I was talking about in therapy. Like he's not really thinking about what he's doing, I don't think. He's just fully in his emotion mind. Like, I'm in pain. I want to do this. I'm going to push her away. Because he's acting out as well. He's in deep pain. And so he's unfortunately acting out towards the person who is most consistently loves him outside of his family. Like their whole lives, pretty much.
He is, and he feels betrayed, and he's interpreting that as betrayal. And once he interprets that as betrayal, he pushes her and locks her out. Because now all of the people that have been safe to him in his life are no longer safe. And did that scene happen after he encountered his first failure on the court too? Or did that happen after? I can't remember the order of the scenes, but he was running the country with that team, like playing.
I think it's when he was very successful still.
Because
because the game, so he found out about his dad. They both had a game.
She did well.
She did well.
He didn't do well.
He didn't get like the last shot or whatever. Like
he was distracted.
He was distracted. He just didn't play as well. Didn't play anything like what he normally plays like, basically. And then she ended up playing in the game a lot that she was in and ended up helping them win the game. So she was all excited. She comes to the party and that's where he's like,
oh yeah,
that's
right.
where that's where he starts. That's where he acts up.
Right. Because not only did he have that, but then he also lost the foundational part of his identity that he always had to fall back on that just came natural to him. She has fought and earned that basketball talent. Like, I mean, she has the talent innately, but she works and has to work so much harder for her success than he does. And when he loses that too, like that is just an extra blow to his identity. And then when he loses his ability to be better than her at that sport, which is always a part of their dynamic because he's better than her, including when they go to that, play for your love scene, is that he's better than her just innately. When he loses that too, then he's extra crushed and feels extra betrayed.
I mean, he really had the book stacked against him. Like, I'm not saying that his response was good, but like in terms of what happens, like that complete and utter shutdown, and that when we shut down completely, we don't feel comfortable being vulnerable with anybody. And sometimes that includes being vulnerable with ourselves and even being able to feel the feelings that we're having, because it's such a devastating blow that it's confusing. So also just knowing that he might also be in a place where he can't even be vulnerable with himself and certainly can't be vulnerable with anyone else. And you can, and I feel like watching the movie, it's very clear. Like I can't imagine it would be hard to see that's kind of what is happening and how important vulnerability is for successful relationships, how important it is, because part of being vulnerable is being very honest, but also sharing your feelings and your thoughts and sharing them with somebody and feeling comfortable to share those things. And that's how we feel more connected to each other. Sometimes that's where the intimacy piece comes into, where you know me really well and I want you to know me really well. And I want to share these things with you. And he's now, I think what we're seeing here is he now is in a place where he doesn't feel like that about anybody. I mean, I don't even know that he would feel comfortable, especially the role he takes with his mom. Like, I don't even know if he would feel comfortable talking to his mom about it. Like, he kind of talks, but mostly it's his mom.
And I think what's also interesting is that you don't really see him, other than Monica, unless I'm missing something, you don't really see him with like a male best friend. Like, she has, like, she has her sister. She is that kind of rival who becomes a friend in Spain. Like, she seems like she's making connections, and he definitely has friends. Like, when he's at that party, he's definitely in like a group.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's other people in his life that I would imagine she's probably the person he's most vulnerable with. Like, she's his best friend in addition to being his girlfriend.
And I feel like, just to point out, like, I wonder how genuine some of his male relationships are. And not like in real life, but like the way that it's portrayed, like, you know, like how they make a point to show him on the bench. Like, the first time he plays, everybody's like excited about him. They're patting him on the back. Like, it says he's starting. And then at the end of that game, he's the only one left on the bench, and everybody got up and walked away without him. And nobody said anything to him.
Oh,
nobody,
yeah.
like, exactly. So like, that's like such a public shaming thing to do to him. So also this piece of, I do wonder, are some of his male relationships based around the fact that he's really good at basketball, and like, maybe they don't know anything else about him. I mean, I don't know.
No, I think that's a great observation, because it's that thing of, as most people, I think, in this somewhere, anyone interested in this field, I think, is obviously familiar with Brene Brown at this point. She's written a bunch of books. I've read a few of them. And she talks about like vulnerability versus shame. And
bingo. Brittany talked about a book.
Oh, is that a bingo?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not surprised. And I love the way she puts it, in that I think she calls it like, you're a wholehearted person. I think that's how she puts it. It's been a while since I've read one of her books. Yeah. When you can be really vulnerable. And the way that she puts it, which is really beautiful, simplistic and beautiful, is when you are shame-based and you make a mistake, that mistake is about your identity, like who you are. Like, if I do something, like if I made a mistake that, like, I got bad on a test, I'd be like, I'm so stupid, I'm such an idiot. Like, I'd be talking about it as if that's who I am. And if you're a wholehearted person, or like a vulnerable person, and you make a mistake, it's just a mistake. It's just it's an action that you didn't do particularly well, but it's not who you are. And I think what sucks about someone like Quincy, or even Monica, where your identity is also very much tied to a skill you have, is that I don't know how you couldn't feel that shame of, like, when you fuck something up, especially if it's tied to your relationships, your worth, your financial worth, on top of your like social worth, of like, and you can see it with Monica too, when she fucks up, she feels it in her gut. And it's like, I'm an idiot. I suck. I'm bad. Instead of just, I had a bad day, or I had a bad game, where someone would do if they were a more wholehearted person. And so I think with Quincy too, and his dad, like, the shame of that, I think, is also the same, of like, it says something about who I am, versus like being able to separate it. When you are a more wholehearted person, you can separate things better. And I think, but also when you're that age, like 19, you can't separate anything. Like, you can't separate anything, which is what is so hard. Like, watching it, it's like this poor little babies. Well, it's like, you just can't separate anything.
Well, and just like how that shaming incident of him being on the bench by himself and the whole team gets up and walks away, like his identity has already been shattered in so many different ways. So to now have this thing that he thinks and feels like he's losing because he doesn't know who he is, right? Like the impact of that, which again draws us back to this interaction that they have where he is just like, I don't fucking know you. I don't know you. I'm going to do what the fuck I want. Like and I think that makes so much sense because he's had this repeated kind of like setbacks or maybe like pushes of his identity consistently over like a couple of days.
And so it makes sense that they couldn't find each other again until they were in their 20s, until like 5 years later. Even though I still think that's very young. Like I really thought I knew this movie covered a span of time. I thought it would cover more like in their NBA careers. Like I thought it would go maybe even to like their late 20s and maybe they'd meet again on the court. That's so corny, but like I know sometimes movies go there and I'd never seen this movie before. Because I know the picture on the front is them like kissing, holding a basketball. And so I don't know, my mind was like maybe they go head to head, but that makes no sense because I don't know a lot about sports, but I know the WNBA and the male NBA do not play each other. They do not. But anywho,
but I think being a former athlete myself, like
brag.
I'm not a never a professional athlete. It's not a brag, it's a fact. I was an athlete.
Just fucking teasing you.
You asshole.
Just teasing you.
Jeez Louise.
So sensitive. Are you shame-based, bro? Are you shame-based, bro?
We're all shame-based.
Yeah.
I'm wholehearted. I'm working on it.
I'm going to shame you right now.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're going to see how long that holds up.
It's just a mistake.
No, but anyway.
So fuck you.
I'm going to wait outside your house with a snowball and just pelt you.
Coming off real creep.
Yeah, you really are. You really are. That was like a really direct, weird thing to say.
You know what? Woman? I'm going to wait outside your apartment then. Because you made me feel bad.
I'm going to show you how much of a man I am.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But anyway, as a former athlete, continue.
As a former athlete, like speaking to that, like the culture of athletics is all production. It doesn't matter how well you know somebody. If you blow it for the team, if your action blows it for the team, or you do something dumb that you miss a block, you miss a throw, you miss a shot, and it causes the team to lose, you carry that with you, and they may react like that. Like the way I interpreted that scene, like obviously the director very deliberately showed that. I didn't take it as the team necessarily shunning him. I saw that as, like, at least not wholly. The game was over and they were going to the locker room and he went to sit down as everybody else was leaving, but no one stayed with him. No one consoled him. So it wasn't like a group shaming where they just left him. But, normally if he was in with the team, well, like they would have consoled him. Would have been like it's okay, we'll get the next one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like your radar on it is still right on. But maybe it was the other way, and that's just the way I took it. But like the culture around sports is so shallow anyway. It doesn't matter how much they like you. If you blow it for the team, they're going to cast you out.
Yeah.
And he has never experienced that. He has been the star. People have come to see him his whole life. His path has been laid out in front of him. He's going to the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And this first time that he encounters this skill, this trait of his that he relies on for his identity that is gone, he crumbles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you see that happens to people. If someone gets the yips, someone gets a case of the yips, all of a sudden your star athlete doesn't have it anymore because they're distracted by something. Like you see it, and guys will quit when they get that rather than face that shame. They will quit. They will just leave and never play the sport again.
Mm-hmm. Which is why there's a whole field called sports psychology, which I know nothing about. Besides the yips. And I think I only know that because it's been on TV shows I've watched.
Right. Or when baseball players slump.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've heard that one. I've never heard the yips thing before.
You got the yips.
Well, yeah, I've never heard that.
I think there was an episode of the show Happy Endings that it was all about the yips, which is, I think, how I know it.
Yeah.
And I think when you are more shame-based as well, you make those kind of like, and also when you're young, you make those very like black and white decisions, like not just with Monica, but also like his dad. I mean, I will say it sounds like his dad doesn't do a good job of trying to bridge that situation after it falls apart. But like he fully ices his dad out too post scandal.
Yeah, he does. Well, and also I think the part of that felt that the part where he said, well, you, and maybe I'm thinking about the mom said this, but I feel like the dad said this of like, well, you didn't call me either. Yeah. Like the dad in these situations, the parent should be the one to reach out to the kid. Yes. You cannot wait. You are older than them. They're a fucking teenager, like, or they're a young adult, whatever it is. They are not going to feel the empowerment to come to you. Like that piece of that was just like really a bummer. I did appreciate the speech that he gave him about like, look, you can hate me. That is totally fine. However, but also maybe not reading the room. Like, I don't like, clearly your son is like icing you out, dude. Like
their relationship was not in good hands.
No. Hilarious, Ben.
That, yes. I'm like, it took you a minute to catch it.
Ew, Ben.
Silly. You're so silly.
I'm sorry. I always see him as President Palmer from 24, honestly. But
same.
Oh, okay. So,
but also the insurance guy, yes.
Well, now he is, yeah.
Yes. Well, and I feel like, again, like he gives that speech, but that speech very much is like, look, you can be mad at me forever. This is an opportunity. This is something we've talked about. I know that you've talked about it with other people. Like this is a move that you don't like, that I don't think is in your best interest. Like in that, but again, going back to him saying well, you didn't call me either is just, you can't expect a kid to have, just like you can't expect a kid to tell an adult no at a certain age. They're not going to say no to an adult at a certain age. They're just not. It's not a place that they're at. And
also, when you've done the fucking up, you're the one who needs to be doing the effort to rebuild.
Yes. Not waiting, holding your phone and staring at it. Like it's your job. There's no like, well, I was waiting until they reached out. Like, no, they're a fucking kid. They're 16, they're 15 or 19 or whatever. They're 25. It doesn't matter. Like you have to act like the grown up. Like you always have to act like the grown up because you're the fucking parent and reach out to that kid. And because I feel like part of what, again, that reinforces this idea that my dad isn't who I thought he was, right? Not only did he do this thing, he also like, I haven't seen him. like he's not trying to
throw away our relationship.
Yeah, he threw away our relationship, and so everything the relationship that we had together no longer exists. So I mean, again, his dad just reinforcing that by not trying to maintain the relationship in any way that he could.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, I guess we can slide into treatment unless there's anything else we want to talk about in terms of what we've seen so far in this movie. I mean, I do think in vulnerability, she shows a lot of vulnerability at the very end. Monica, I mean, it's very movie-esque in which 2 weeks before the wedding, she finds him and she's like, no, it's been me all along. That's very movie, which is very romantic movie. You can make all the noises you want, Ben.
I hate that trope. I hate it because I see it like hurt real people a lot.
Yeah.
You know real people that's happened to?
Yeah. Clients, like a lot of people I know. Yeah. I know people that have been through it or think that this shit's okay. Like it's such a
you live a more exciting life than I.
Yeah, I don't know anybody this has happened to.
It's not necessarily that it's worked out, but people like feel like this pressure that you have to act instead of like,
that
you have to tell people and not realizing the impact of the consequences that it actually has.
Well, I said after they hugged at the end of the basketball game, I said he's going to lose all those deposits. It's too late. Anywho. But I do think she shows a lot of vulnerability in taking that risk, though they're so far away from where they've been in terms of their relationship with each other. But anywho, so in treatment, I think who I'd want to work with would be Monica. I think there's so much like identity work I'd want to do with her as a woman and kind of defining what it means to be a woman. I would think after the breakup, I think seeing her then, I would imagine, because you can tell, like, post the breakup, she doesn't really date anyone else. It seems like she's kind of been stuck on him, which I guess in the theme of like the movie magic of it all is maybe you could argue that they're soulmates, so like she couldn't move on because they're supposed to be together. Like there's that argument. But I would say like in more of a grounded sense, maybe a real life sense, I wonder if for her, he's the only boy that she ever dated. He's the only boy maybe in her mind that's ever really showed interest in her. And then he rejects her. Not only he rejects her, but he rejects her immediately for another more like stereotypically beautiful feminine woman. And so I wonder if that would really throw her in terms of my mom was right. Mm-hmm. I'm not someone that people want to date, like guys want to date. I'm not an attractive enterprise for a guy. I'm good at basketball. I'm just gonna put my head down, throw myself even harder into basketball and do that. Because even her friend says, or her basketball player peer in Spain was like, basically said, how much ass are you getting? Because I'm getting like Italian. I can't get enough Italian men. Yeah. Like I have to like bat him away with a stick in Italy. And she's like, nah. And she was like, are you serious? And so it makes me wonder, like how much her identity is playing a part in that. And so I think the work I'd want to do with her is sort of like that identity empowerment work, which I think would be a lot of just talk therapy, kind of who does she think she is? Who does she want to be? Kind of just exploring that. You'd have to do work with her growing up and kind of what she was told, like a lot of the messaging she was told. So it'd probably just be a long-term, like sort of talk therapy, but also maybe doing a lot of like maybe prompt-based work. And by that, I mean like journaling, like trying to figure out who do you want to be? What does it actually look like trying to expand that out, like having her make lists of like, what are some like good parts of me, like expanding her identity in terms of her value beyond just being a basketball player, being also like a woman and what that means to her. And also expanding her idea of like what a woman means, that being a woman isn't just being like a frilly, pretty girl in a sundress who is submissive or even just like who her sister is, because her sister doesn't seem like a submissive type. I really like her sister, but I also really like Regina Hall, so I could be projecting. And but her sister also, like, she had a baby. I don't know if her sister was married or if she seemed pretty young, so I guess my assumption was a baby out of wedlock, which has its own.
I think her sister's married.
You think her sister's married?
Yeah, because I don't think she lives there.
She does.
I thought she had the baby in college.
Oh, I don't know.
Her sister would have been already in college, so by the time that baby is born, we're already where her sister should be at least 2 years out of college. So I think it's an unknown, but I think the implication that was similar to Hannah, that her sister seems to have existed as a foil to her, where her sister did everything right, and followed the normal path. So right. I would assume with the way this movie is set up, that child was born consistent with their family values. Okay,
that's probably true. I think I was just thinking her sister was still really young. Anywho, but she could be married.
This had been 5 years after.
Oh, was it the 5 years mark? I keep confusing when things happened in the timeline of the movie, like the quarters of the movie, as they put it.
So that scene was the 5 years later.
Oh, I got confused. I was thinking it was before.
So she was definitely like she's married.
Oh, well, then I got that wrong.
Right, yeah. Monica and Q are 24 at that point ish. So her sister would have been in 20s.
Well, then I'm totally wrong. I was thinking of it totally differently wrong. Apologies. But I would want to do just a lot of work with Monica about who she is, and that like I'm talking about the Brene Brown stuff, like separating things that happen to you from who you are. Like your identity is totally separate from things that happen to you, the choices that you make, that you can still be a whatever person you identify as, even when things happen. And I would imagine she probably really closely identifies with that relationship with Q, and especially the breakup with Q. And so I'd really want to try to help her sort of separate that from who she is, which just takes a lot of talking things through. And my job as a therapist in those moments is to just gently challenge. And how you do that as a therapist is you just ask a lot of open-ended questions, because what I sometimes tell people is when at least in my experience as a therapist, is when I ask someone a question, 80% of the time I know the answer. I just know that they need to be the one that says it, because it comes out of their mouth. It's way more powerful than when it comes out of my mouth, especially if I'm challenging a belief that they're holding. If I say it, they can just write it off as like, well, that's what my therapist thinks, or that's what my therapist is saying. But if I kind of make them say it, then it's harder to write it off or dismiss it. And so with her, I think it would be a lot of me just very gently saying like, oh, and so what do you think about this? Or like, how does that like challenge? What would it be like if it was like this instead? So a lot of just probing questions to make her kind of expand her mind and make her self-identify a lot of differing beliefs. And sometimes we also use techniques like magic wand. Like if you could wave a magic wand and things could look the way you want it to, what would that be? And why does something have to be that way? And so it would probably just be a lot of, like I said, processing and talk therapy to kind of peel back the layers of how she thinks and kind of get to a better place, or to a more authentic place. And like I said, building up who she is, which I think also can be what's healing about a therapeutic relationship, is you can kind of heal the relationship you've had with other people. Like obviously I wouldn't be her mom and I wouldn't be like a mom proxy, but therapists can be a place to, because my job is to provide unconditional positive regard. Like no matter what Monica tells me, I'm supporting her, I'm with her, I'm, reinforcing that she's a good person. And so that can be healing, having that relationship with someone, even though they're your professional therapist, who is affirming you no matter what, can be very healing when you've been honestly raised by people who haven't done that for you. So it's almost like healing that child part of you that got damaged with however your parents treated you, in this situation, how Monica's mom treated her. So that's what I would do.
Okay, I guess I'll go next, because it makes sense that we let our relationship person close out the relationship movie. That seems to make sense. We'll give Hannah the slam dunk at the end here. See what I did there?
Good one, Ben.
So that's a bingo. That's some dad jokes crap right there.
Oh god,
I
that's a bingo. That's a bingo. You fucking do a dad joke every time. Go ahead.
I am a dad. This is my right. Anyway, but I think for me, I would want to intervene with Q, I think, and I would want to work with him right at that second where we see him start to unravel. Ideally, he would have a coach or a position coach. I'm not sure how basketball works with like how many coaches are on a team. I'm sure they have a coach and an assistant. I don't know if they have people that work with their individual position groups. Again, I was a football player, so I associate things right back to that.
Not necessarily. I mean, I played basketball. I mean, like in high school, and badly, and only like, I mean, I loved playing basketball, which I'll talk about in final thoughts. But yeah, they don't necessarily have position coaches.
So it's not like a coach that works with the guards and a coach that works with the.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, but also like I don't follow basketball much as a grown up, so I could be wrong. But I just feel like in terms of looking at when you watch a game, there's pretty much only a coach and an assistant coach.
Okay. Well, I mean, either way, there's just, there's two coaches and like 15 people on the team. So
yeah.
They are going to know what's going on, and when they see somebody. So my hope would be, and what would probably happen now, is that if you see your star player and knowing why he's screwing up, because again, this is a public situation. It's not like it's a mystery why he is having performance problems. Because the whole world knows what's going on with his dad. And I would hope that a coach would see that and just preemptively refer him to talk to someone, particularly someone like me, or even a sports therapist, but to have a place to process his reactions to what is going on so that he doesn't feel so isolated. And I think, honestly, having just a place where someone is going to use person-centered techniques, I think would be the direction I would want to go with him. I'd probably like work on doing a straight up debriefing with him on kind of what's going on and what happened and his interpretation, kind of step by step, layer by layer, but also coming from that with a person-centered approach of going, okay, let's have a place where you can talk about it, be regarded as a good person, regardless of what horrible things you say in anger at your father, and have a place where you can openly express your feelings and feel supported. I think that would be a critical thing for him. And then he probably would have recovered from some degree of the behaviors that we see him do early on and return to form as he has a place to address the intense feelings he's got, especially being, 18, 19 at this point. That's a lot to process and handle, but also it puts you in a developmental stage where you are overvaluing your experience on and your role in situations to a point that it's like it's still fairly egocentric. He's going to be totally centered on how his interpretation of this and his role in it plays out, rather than understanding that he's a piece in a much larger story. And I think wanting to work with him on that and separating out his experience versus what's going on the court versus what's going on in his personal life and having an outlet would be critical. I also think tying in some components from acceptance and commitment therapy would be really helpful to learn to accept that the emotions are going to come. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like such a powerful component of ACT therapy that I really like, is that the emotions are going to happen. They are unavoidable. You cannot change that they're going to come.
You can't trick yourself.
You can't trick yourself. You can't. And this is something you see in athlete culture a whole lot, because there's so much mind over matter that exists in training, in games, in pushing yourself beyond the limits, the messaging of give 110%, all that kind of stuff. All those tropes, they're true. They happen all the time. And the expectations are that regardless of the situation, you win the game, even though you don't always win the game. That's always the expectation and the mindset. And the elite athlete mindset that comes in has to be, I can dominate myself and my opponent. And, like if you have any questions about that, like watching the documentary from the Bulls, The Last Dance, and where you get a chance to hear, especially Michael Jordan, talk about kind of how he interpreted things and how his mindset was so different, and hear his teammates talk about him. That's who people pressure you to be like. It's that elite mindset, and he is going to put that on himself, and you're going to need a therapist to sit with him and be like, there is a difference between the Q on the court and the Q, the person that's dealing with this stuff, and what you can put aside and what you can do with your body in a game situation versus what you can deal with when you're a person is different. These waves of emotion are inescapable, and having a plan that, okay, these are going to come and I have tools to deal with them when they do, because it's an acceptance that the emotions are going to come and a commitment to doing something with them, right? Mm-hmm. And like learning to kind of find that balance. So blending like the components of person-centered and ACT therapy are really kind of where I'd want to go with him, and especially strike with him right when he's in that crisis, and not watch him fall apart and declare for the draft and do all these things that it looks like the coaches had just kind of dismissed him and let him do his own thing and kind of like wrote him off as, well, he's going to do whatever he wants. He's a prima donna, and let him get the attention. We'll see what happens. And I think his story would have been different, and had he had some kind of intervention at that point.
I think that's a great point, Ben, especially because like you could argue, does he leave his fiance so quickly too? Because he's just following, like he's not following his values, kind of what you were talking about.
No, he's not. He's not following anything that has got him where he are. He's not grounded. He's now just trying to.
In it.
Well,
Just
and
kind of going with emotions, going with the momentum.
It's that too, but he's also struggling to regain control, and he feels like he's lost. So he's going to control the only things that he can control, which since he can no longer control her, he can no longer control what's going on in his family. He can no longer even control his game. He can control that he can declare for the draft and get himself out of all of those situations and start making some money and capitalize on the fame he's got now. So he makes that decision, which despite being counseled against that.
Yeah, good points. So as always, I
didn't think about it.
Bingo.
I don't know why I always think I can do this. I probably should stop doing it like this. So I was just.
What does that meme? It says I'm gonna wing it, and then it says about something I definitely should not wing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hashtag Hannah.
Yeah. Well, also just like COVID, like my mind is just fried in terms of thinking about treatment for people. So I was thinking about trying to kind of put the different people together, like thinking about Quincy and Monica, but then thinking about his family and her family. And I think what I feel like what I wish could have happened is doing family therapy with Quincy and his parents.
Mm-hmm.
And even doing, and to be perfectly honest, even just doing a session with him and his dad. So in terms of, and so what that would kind of, so what I do when family therapy, of course, always, you want to have as many people there as possible. That's what we always want. But in real life, that's pretty fucking hard to get. So sometimes you're only talking to a part of the family. And that again can be pretty normal and natural. And usually what I try to do is still do the intake, get the context that I need, and then kind of just focus on the relationship that's in front of me. So I feel like what I would have wanted to do, and again, I don't think, I can't imagine that I can't imagine that they would go to therapy at this point because of the rift, because of everything. So I'm not.
Mom's done.
Yeah,
Done.
Exactly.
She's done.
But what I think would happen is especially since we used to work with Ben, and we used to do a lot of, you just collaborate a lot with each other. I feel like Ben would say, hey, could you do a session with this client and his parents? And I think his parents would do it for him. Like, I don't think that it would be the mom asking or the dad asking, but I think if we knew that having a session with them all together to kind of get some of these feelings out on the floor and get them shook out a little bit, get some clarity and just some communication, and to help them be vulnerable with each other. Now, do I think this would have happened right away? No, but it could be something that could help heal him and his dad's relationship later. Once he's in a different place, once he, maybe actually I would be seeing them after he's married to Monica and they've, and maybe, what I feel like it would actually be, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm just going all over the place, is when Quincy and Monica have their first kid, if they have kids. Sometimes when we have life transitions,
well, they had kids. Remember at the end they have a baby.
Oh yeah, that's right. I totally forgot.
He's sitting courtside with the kiddo.
I totally forgot that he had a kid at the thing. Okay. So anyway, so in that instance, I feel like sometimes different thoughts and feelings come up for us around when we're having a transition in our life. We start to think about our parents. And so I wonder if that would be a time when Quincy would be at a point where he was like, I want to figure this out because I don't want to have to, I want to repair this relationship because I feel like I'm ready to now. And having this and being able to bring them together and just talk about what do they want the relationship to look like? What do they feel like needs to heal? And what would feel like a safe first step going forward of something they could do to help heal this relationship. And another piece of it would be maybe role playing, having them role play each other. And because a lot of times and actually I don't use role playing that often for some reason. I think because I don't really have any families that I work with, because it's so rare to work with an entire family anyway, in some settings. Anyway, when you have people role play with each other, because it's literally being in someone else's shoes. So I would have, the dad would be Quincy and Quincy would be the dad. And I would have them act out, just be like, the feelings that you were having then, I want you to, what are those feelings? And I want you to role play each other. And there are so many different ways that we interpret what we see based on the narrative that we're holding about something. So to actually have to be in someone else's shoes and stand in front of them and be like, well, I'm the dad and I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. Like Quincy could very much be like, and that seeing his dad, seeing him portray him in that way is such a big connection in terms of the dad understanding this is what it felt like when this happened. This is what he thought you were thinking when these things were going on. And so I feel like having a role play with them would just could be really helpful, and also would maybe be something where I would just see them a couple times. Like, I don't know that it would necessarily, depending on how things were going and blah, blah, blah. But it could be something where having a couple of sessions to just focus on their relationship, I think could be really helpful, because I do feel that their relationship could be repaired if they were open to it. This is a repairable thing, just like infidelity is a repairable thing in a relationship if both people really do want to be together and want to work on it, right? So
very repairable.
Absolutely. Very
a lot of work, but it can be done.
Absolutely. And so just kind of trying to point out that even if Quincy can't do that until he's 40 or until he's 35, if his dad is still alive, there's nothing wrong with repairing the relationship then. Because I think that will have such an effect in my experience. And I don't have any kids, but I have a lot of siblings who do. And just people in the world in general, a lot of people, when they have their first children, some of the realizations about what their parents went through or what it was like to have a child can pop back up. And so I just feel, in terms of a life transition, that it would make a lot of sense that Quincy would get to that point.
Oh, yeah.
I would say, though, based on... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, no, just being the resident, possessor of a child here, I would agree with that. There's many things you realize real quick. And I also thought I'll talk about it more in final thoughts a little bit. I thought it was interesting. It seemed to me in the ending, it implied that he gave up his dream. I mean, I know he said he wanted to change, but he was the one parenting while she was on the court.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, clearly something has happened growth-wise, because she's the one who's kind of the successful, not successful, but like however you quantify success.
If you're playing WNBA, you're successful. Yeah. Like, there's no more.
But I mean, like,
nothing above that.
I mean, I could get into a whole argument about what does success mean. But anyway,
in terms of as a basketball player.
Yeah, she's thriving as a basketball player, and he's very much literally on the sidelines with their baby, kind of more of like a house husband energy, where she is more like the working mom who's thriving. And so I love that. I love that being the final image of the movie. And it connotes, I hate that word. It just sounds horrible. That's like, I was thinking about the word loafer the other day, and what a gross word that is when you really think about it. Anyway, but it connotes that
hashtag what the fuck
that that they have they've gone through some discussions. Like, he doesn't seem like, they just seem very happy. So whatever ego might have been there for him, or weird like gender role stuff was going on, they've either worked itself out like with each other, organically, or they maybe have worked things out independently. It is like the 90s though, which I feel like were people going to therapy that much in the 90s?
Probably not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I just feel like, and I also feel like there's also a chance that he just brought the baby to the game and he has very
True.
successful and has found something that he enjoys and has, found something that really works for him, and that he just happened to be.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I just assumed that he was able to make a decision about who he wanted to be and pursue something else, and that he just happened to be at the game. But it could definitely be that too. What
Or
you guys
they're
are describing.
playing for the Lakers.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
No, that's
yeah.
true.
Same
He could still be
stadium.
playing for the Lakers.
Yeah.
Because he was doing physical therapy with the Lakers physio person. Like,
Yeah.
he was still wearing like Lakers stuff when he was working on his knee.
Yeah.
But so we'll flip into final thoughts. I'm going to say her name again because I screwed it up at the front. So this is directed by Gina Prince Bythewood. I hope I'm saying Bythewood correctly. And I really like this movie. I got to know her because I really love The Old Guard, which is a movie we've talked about, I think, in our crossover episode with Thanks for Spieling, about coronavirus and psychology of that. That was a few months ago, when I think around when The Old Guard had come out. But that's a great movie. And I think I could definitely see in this movie what I loved about The Old Guard, because The Old Guard's an action movie, but there's so much like intimacy in The Old Guard and like naturalism and the way that they touch each other and the way they interact as characters. And in this movie, it's in there in spades. Like in the very beginning scene when after they've gotten in the fight and they go to their Monica's house. I think she just moved there, and they're showing each other their karate moves and stuff. Like it's such like how true. It's like such a slow scene in a way. The energy is a lot lower, and then it's just kind of more naturalistic and how kids really behave. And there's so much like real intimacy in her scenes, and she just has such a gentle touch as a director. I'm really interested to see her other movies. I know there's a really good one that I've heard about from like 2012. With actress Gugu, I can't think of her last name, where she's a singer. So I'm really interested. I think it's called Beyond the Lights. So I'm really interested to peek at that one as well. I think it's a romantic drama as well. But I really like this movie. It's really sweet. I can tell by people it's very beloved. It feels very 90s. I love the song Fool of Me by Michelle. I also can think of her last name. I'm really killing it in this episode with people's last names.
You're just nailing it.
And so I love that song. So it's been stuck in my head since I watched it yesterday. And I think it's just a very sweet movie. Omar Epps doesn't really do it for me, but he definitely they have really good chemistry. And this is definitely a movie that if it was on TV, I would like keep watching it until the end. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I probably didn't watch it till now because the idea of watching something that was basketball themed just wouldn't have appealed to me when I was 14 when this movie first came out. And so, yeah, but I will definitely watch it again.
I'll go, I guess. I actually really like this movie. I hadn't seen it before. I probably have seen it in passing various scenes from it, but I had never sat down and actually watched the movie, and I really liked it. I thought it was really well done. I thought it was engaging. I thought the way that they told the story visually and through dialogue, and as well as the way that the actors did a phenomenal job. I felt like their emotions were authentic. The chemistry between our two leads was really good. It all felt real, and like they did a good job of blending guarded and open, and then totally going through a flip in that third quarter part of the movie where they completely had to flip roles, and their like general demeanor changed, like where he got used to failing and she started to get used to winning, and that was like a massive character change point for them. And I really liked the way all of that was done. I would probably watch this film again. I really did think it was really good, and I thought it's interesting now that even as like present and popular as the NBA is it's really gained a lot of steam and been making a lot more money lately. The NBA is a pretty successful league. Even in terms of like women's sports, like you see the gym that the men are playing in versus the gym the women are playing in. For
I said that too when
movie.
we were watching it. I was like, his looks like a professional basketball player, and hers looks like a high school gym, like a
Right.
YMCA.
Right. And the thing that I thought was like really interesting about that is when did this movie came out? When like 93?
No, 2000.
2000.
2000? Okay.
But the time
So-
frame, you're right. The time frame is 1981 to 1993.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a few years behind the movie.
Right. Some of it's in the 80s because Magic is still playing, so it's
Yeah.
a while. But the thing that I thought was interesting is even in the like video game world where NBA 2K is one of the big basketball game. It's one of two of them, but the WNBA teams and players and everything weren't included in that game that's been around since 2000, 99, 98, I don't know, somewhere in that vicinity, around when this movie came out, until NBA 2K20.
Wow. It took 20 years for them to fix that?
20 years for the WNBA to be included in any video game in any way, shape, or form.
That
doesn't surprise me.
Insane.
That
It doesn't
doesn't
surprise
surprise
me
me at all.
either. But wow. And that NBA game that you're talking about, the 2001 or whatever, that was really popular, right? Wasn't it like, isn't it
It's
one
still
of
really
the
popular.
I was gonna say it's one of the my brothers play mostly sports video games, and I
Yeah.
just remember them. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and playing 2K, and I mean, kids
Yeah.
play that, and it's 2K is a hugely popular game. Basketball is not my thing, but the game itself is popular, and for women's sports to still be so disregarded that they don't even get included in video games, and that if they are, that it can't support its own video game, it shows like the way that this character struggled, even further than it goes. Like the only way that she could find professional success was to play in Europe before she could finally make it to the Sparks. And to see him then go like, okay, I made the NBA. And in my interpretation of the end, he stopped playing, and then he became dad and let her play because she loved the game more than he did. And the game didn't mean anything to him anymore, but still was her life.
Mm-hmm.
It was really powerful. And I think that this is definitely a film that will probably hold the test of time.
And you're right to bring up like the acting, like the Monica, the way that she's acted in this movie is so like when she cries in the basketball game, and the way that you can tell how insecure, like it's like coming out of her pores, even though she is like a objectively beautiful girl, you can feel the insecurity. It's a beautifully done role.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she did a great job. I think I first encountered her in Aliens versus Predator, which is it's an aggressively mediocre film, which is
quite a bit different.
But in that one, she's a warrior, and the Predator, like she's the main character, and like burns like acid into her face because she's the only one that kills an alien, and then like it's a whole thing. Don't ever watch the second Aliens versus Predator. The first one is entertaining. But anyway,
I will take your word for
her
it.
acting
That's
even across genres is really powerful, and in this one it was exquisite acting. She did great. They both did. And, last thing I wanted to say, I thought it was interesting that some of the real life parallels or career parallels that started to happen is that Gabrielle Union actually married Dwayne Wade.
Yeah. Yeah, I just realized that when you brought that up earlier, I was like, she totally did marry. Yeah, she did.
She did. And like, so her, like this character that she played in her young career and then became, like the person that married an actual NBA star. And then the Omar Epps got fame later in his career for playing an Ivy League doctor in House, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. I forgot about House.
So I just thought that was an interesting parallel. But in the randomness of my brain, I will now transfer talking over to Hannah.
And they seem very happy. Gabrielle Union and him seem very happy. Dwayne Wade.
They do, and both very successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not that she echoed. I want to say, right? I don't think she echoed her character.
Oh no, I know.
She did that, which makes sense.
I know that you didn't think that. Yeah, I really like this movie. I had never seen it before. I really enjoyed it. It made me, I loved basketball and I loved playing basketball. And I'm like mediocre. Like I wasn't good. I had asthma. I was like pointless kind of. But watching and I have probably haven't watched a professional basketball game in 10 years. But I used to follow it and watch everything, and I followed all the college games and used to pay attention pretty consistently when I was a teenager. But it was so that part of watching this movie was really fun for me, and just kind of the memories of that, of what it is like to play on a team and all those other pieces. So I really enjoyed this movie. I think it was really beautifully acted. And I think I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the softness of some parts of it that I feel like we don't get in rom-coms like this. Like, yes, did it have the tropes? Sure. But it also had real people having a relationship over time, which is quite a bit different than anything else we usually get. And also a movie that I feel like shows, while her mother may not be happy, she certainly seems to be like, it's nice to see happy, healthy relationships of people of color in any story where it doesn't include drugs or violence. Or so, like, just even having that story again, which I know has been talked about a lot, representation matters, and being able to see this story even with the same romantic tropes that other ones have still is powerful in terms of having something like this for people to watch, just kind of in general.
Agreed.
That's true. No drugs, no criminal, traditional intact family until something happens that could happen to any family, not like
absolutely
anything that's troped out.
So I really loved it. I'll definitely watch it again. I love the actress whose name I can't.
Sanaa Lathan.
Sinha. Oh, it's Sinha.
Sanaa Lathan.
Sanaa.
Ugh, we're all saying it wrong. It doesn't matter. She's amazing. Apologies.
I'm sure she'll never hear this.
I'm sure she won't.
So I think all rounds of applause from us about this movie. So with that being said, feel free to find us on any social media platforms. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Popcorn Psychology, Twitter at popcorn_psych. You can email us at popcornpsychology@gmail.com. That's the best place if you have suggestions or messages that you want us to read and respond to. We also are on TikTok now at Popcorn Psychology. That's very new for us. And
exploding, we also have a Patreon, thanks to Brittany's awesomeness on it.
Agreed.
We'll see about that. And Patreon, which we always forget
20,000 likes. 20,000. What are you talking about? We'll see. Get out of here.
Anywho,
Brittany is
we
awesome
always forget
social.
Ben, I'm trying to plug our Patreon, Ben.
I'm trying to build you up and give you credit, give you props for the good work that you do.
Thank you. We are delirious. We are also hitting what I think everyone's calling the pandemic wall.
Yeah.
If you haven't noticed with this episode. So you can find us on Patreon as well if you want to throw us a financial bone. We do most of this. We do almost all of it out of our own pocket. We also have TeePublic. If you want to get merchandise from us, you can find us at TeePublic. So just wishing you happy February, happy Valentine's Day, happy Black History Month. And if you want to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, it's the best way people can find us. And we really appreciate that support.